Today, we are pulling back the curtain on a fundamental, almost hidden law of buyer behavior. We're going to explore what really drives a purchasing decision online. And you know what? It's probably not what you think. Beneath the surface chaos of clicks and scrolls, there is a single, hidden formula that predicts every buyer decision. So what is this universal cognitive shortcut that determines if your funnel wins or fails? Now, this isn't just some rhetorical question to get us started. It actually points to a deep, underlying structure in how we all make choices, a structure that, frankly, most marketers completely miss. And that brings us to this, the great paradox of digital sales. You look at your analytics, you see this mess of data, right? High bounce rates, abandoned carts, users going all over the place. It's so easy to assume that buyer behavior is just fundamentally random. But that's an illusion. It blinds us to a really critical truth. When we're faced with a choice, all of us default to predictable mental shortcuts. We aren't sitting there weighing every single pro and con. No, we are instinctively looking for the path that prioritizes two things above everything else: ease and safety. And that is where predictability lives. So, let's expose this hidden formula. We're going to start by shattering that common illusion about marketing and really reveal the cognitive reality of how a buyer's mind actually works. This slide really frames the strategic shift we have to make. On the left, you have the illusion, this idea that every buyer is some unique, unpredictable puzzle, and to win, you have to build these incredibly complex, persuasive arguments. But the truth, over on the right, is so much more elegant. Buyers aren't chaotic at all. They're efficient. They rely on these things called heuristics, these mental shortcuts to make decisions fast. And that means success doesn't depend on out-arguing your customer. It depends on making their decision feel effortless and completely safe. So, you might be wondering, where did this all come from? Well, this wasn't just some marketing idea somebody cooked up. It actually has its roots in a genuine crisis of modern life and some pretty groundbreaking psychological research that explained how we responded to it. And the cause was this: a crisis of information overload. I mean, with the rise of the internet, we all went from having just a few choices to having millions. And that sheer volume of options, it's paralyzing. It creates what psychologists call decision fatigue. Our brains just aren't built to rationally analyze thousands of competing products. Just think about buying a new pair of headphones online. You're hit with hundreds of brands, thousands of reviews, dozens of features. It's totally overwhelming. To cope, our brains had to find a faster, more reliable way to make good enough decisions, without just shutting down. And that adaptive response brings us to this crucial concept, heuristics. The framework for this was really established by the Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman and his partner Amos Tversky. What they showed was that humans consistently rely on these mental shortcuts to deal with complexity. We don't use slow, deliberate logic for most decisions. Instead, we use what they called System 1 thinking. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's emotional, it's your gut feeling. And it's this system where heuristics do all their work. And once we understood this, it led to a pretty radical shift in marketing strategy. I mean, instead of trying to build these super complex models to figure out a sale, strategists could just focus on a simple predictive ratio. The game was no longer about crafting the perfect logical argument. Instead, it became all about influencing the buyer's fast-thinking, intuitive brain. And this shift revealed the path forward. Success now meant focusing intensely on just 4 key variables that guide that intuitive choice. Okay, this is the heart of it all. We are now going to decode that conversion ratio. We're going to build the formula piece by piece so you can see exactly how it predicts a buyer's final decision. Let's start with the top half of the equation, the numerator. You can think of these as the positive forces, the motivators. These are the elements that create that desire and really pull a customer toward that buy button. And the 2 motivators are clarity and value. Now, clarity is all about instant comprehension. Can a visitor understand what you're offering and why it matters in, like, 5 seconds? If they have to struggle to figure it out, you've already lost. Value is the perceived benefit. It's the answer to that fundamental question every buyer has: what's in it for me? The stronger and clearer that answer is, the more motivation you create. A great example is Dropbox. They didn't sell cloud storage, that's a feature. They sold your files anywhere. Now that's value. It was instantly clear and incredibly powerful. Now for the other side of the coin, the bottom half of the equation, the denominator. These are the inhibitors. They're the negative forces that create resistance, doubt, and ultimately kill conversions. Make no mistake, this is the enemy. And the 2 main inhibitors are friction and risk. friction is just a measure of how much effort, physical or mental, a buyer has to put in. A super long form, a confusing checkout process, pages that load slowly, that is all friction. Risk is that measure of doubt. It's the buyer's fear of making a bad purchase. It's that little voice asking, will this actually solve my problem? Or, what if this doesn't fit? Or, is this website even secure? It's that deep fear of wasting money and feeling buyer's remorse. So when you put it all together, you get this, the conversion heuristic. The probability of a conversion is equal to clarity multiplied by value, all divided by friction multiplied by risk. Now, this isn't just a clever acronym. It's a predictive ratio that governs intuitive choice. A conversion only happens when the forces up top significantly outweigh the forces down below. So the crucial point here is, your job isn't just to increase the top, it's to ruthlessly eliminate the bottom. And look, this isn't just some marketing theory. Each and every component of this formula is directly tied to a core psychological principle. Clarity, that leverages cognitive fluency, our brain's bias towards things that are easy to process. Value taps into our basic motivation. Friction is a direct measure of what's called cognitive load. And risk, well, that triggers loss aversion, the powerful, powerful fear of losing something. This entire system is built on the science of how we think. All right, let's do a deep dive into that denominator, because this is where the highest leverage is. We're going to focus on friction and risk, because minimizing these two variables is by far the fastest path to increasing sales. Let's start with risk. This quote really gets to the heart of the psychological principle of loss aversion. For our brains, the pain of losing something is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the exact same thing. And this is a survival instinct. Right? It's baked into our DNA. It makes us inherently cautious and risk-averse, especially when we're about to spend our hard-earned money. This chart just illustrates the point perfectly. I mean, the joy you feel from finding $50 is real, but the pain you feel from losing $50, it's way more intense. You can see it right there on the screen. And that disproportionate weight of loss means that a buyer's fear is a much stronger force than their desire. Even a tiny amount of perceived risk can be enough to completely stop a purchase, no matter how great your value proposition is. Okay, now let's talk about the other enemy, friction. The science behind this is something called cognitive load theory. Think of your brain as having a finite amount of working memory, kind of like RAM in a computer. When a task feels too complicated or effortful, like filling out a 15-field form or trying to navigate a confusing menu, it overloads that working memory. And the brain's defense mechanism is actually pretty simple, avoidance. It just shuts down and abandons the task. This is why a customer will leave your site, not because they don't want your product, but because the process of buying it just felt like too much work. Okay, so we've dug into the theory and the psychology. Now let's translate all of these powerful insights into a practical, actionable framework. This is the blueprint for mastering the heuristic. The path to mastery really follows three strategic imperatives. First, you've got to maximize clarity. This means a headline that a fifth grader can understand instantly. Second, and this is so key, you must ruthlessly attack friction. And I use the word ruthlessly for a reason. You have to be relentless in simplifying every single step. Get rid of form fields. Use one-click purchase options like Amazon has mastered. Make the path to buying completely effortless. And third, neutralize risk. You have to anchor trust immediately with ironclad guarantees like a 30-day money-back, no questions asked, along with customer testimonials and clear social proof. These signals tell the buyer's fast-thinking brain, hey, this decision is safe. And here's the crucial point. The formula becomes your main diagnostic tool. Instead of just guessing why your conversion rate is low, you can use the heuristic to form a hypothesis. Is the problem a lack of clarity in our messaging? Or is the perceived value too low? Is there too much friction in our checkout process? Or is the perceived risk just too high? This lets you focus all your A/B testing resources on fixing the one variable that is actually broken, which is a much, much more efficient way to grow. All right, let's bring this all home with the final core insight of this entire system. This is the ultimate takeaway, the reason this formula is so predictive and so powerful. You see, the real secret to predictable sales isn't about persuasion or clever tricks. It's about decoding the buyer's deep, non-conscious, and universal need for two things: safety and simplicity. The conversion heuristic works because it applies cold, hard logic to this fundamental human instinct. It recognizes that every buyer's brain is constantly running a subconscious calculation, weighing that potential reward against the effort and the risk. Your job is to make that calculation an obvious, no-brainer win. And this is what it all comes down to. The best marketing doesn't push people through a funnel. It doesn't have to coerce or cajole. It pulls them toward value because it does one thing perfectly. It makes the safest choice the easiest one. And when safety and simplicity align, the decision becomes automatic, intuitive, and, most importantly, predictable.